In Touhou 9, Cirno gets to go on her own little mini-adventure. What follows ends up being one of the most introspective stories in all of Touhou. So for Cirno Day 2022, let's talk about the time Cirno had an existential crisis. Cirno's story starts innocently enough. While people like Reimu want to investigate the incident, Cirno is simply just enjoying the flowers. She switches between hanging out at home and beating up any trespassers to moving around to try to find a good view. At one point, she flies to the sky to try to find cherry blossoms, and Lyrica has to explain to her that she won't see anything through the clouds. So, the fights start out simple. As time goes on, Cirno's wins get more and more impressive. Depending on RNG, she can take down either Reimu, Marissa, Yomu, or Sakia, all noteworthy victories. In Stage 6, she defeats Raisin. Once she finishes, she says, "Yeah, I'm the best," and decides to move around a bit more. Cirno wanders all the way to a new lake and realizes that she's being followed. Aya started trailing her to get a scoop. Cirno's strength was so eye-catching that it got the attention of a reporter. Not liking this violation of privacy, Cirno defeats Aya, and Aya happily continues to trail her for a bit. After finally losing Aya, Cirno makes her way to a mysterious sunflower garden, and Yuka appears. Here's the thing about Yuka. She likes to threaten people just for shits and giggles. In this case, she tells Cirno that the sunflowers are stalking her and that they don't like trespassers. As Yuka says, "You know that we use the saying, make a beehive out of someone, when we want to mean, completely screw someone up." Cirno demonstrates her first bit of actual self-awareness as she says, "Maybe I shouldn't have come here." And so, Yuka terrorizes Cirno in a fight for a few minutes, and Cirno eventually finds an opening to escape. Important to note, Yuka is the only character Cirno fights that doesn't have a damage portrait when defeated. Cirno really did just run. She vows to go somewhere quieter. As if her luck couldn't get any worse, Cirno ends up wandering from Yuka's sunflower garden to Muenzuka, a hill where souls who have no one to remember them wander to. As is the case with everyone else in this game, Cirno ends up encountering the Yama, Shikieki. Shikieki talks about how graves are kind of strange. People who die don't exactly need graveyards, but instead, people who live need graveyards to recognize people who die. This nameless hill stands in contrast to that. Cirno says she doesn't understand, and is sick of fighting, so she wants to go home. But Shikieki stops her. The reason Cirno doesn't understand Shikieki's talks of death isn't simply because she's a bit stupid, but also because she's a fairy. Fairies are born from nature in Touhou. If a fairy dies, they don't really. Instead, they reincarnate from the nature around them back into just what they were before. So, they can't die. After all, in Gensokyo, nature is eternal. Right? Here's what Shikieki says. Cirno possesses great power. Cirno isn't simply caught up in her own hype. She really is the strongest fairy. But Cirno's cocky use of her power means that she gets into trouble a lot. Shikieki says that with so much trouble, Cirno may eventually take so much damage that the power of her nature might vanish. Cirno claims that this won't happen because, "I'm the strongest." But Shikieki continues. Without the power of nature, Cirno would die. And Shikieki has no idea if Cirno would go to heaven or hell. Cirno shakenly says, "Such a human-like threats won't work on me." And Shikieki says this. "A small stream's flow, a bird's cry, an insect's song. Even Mother Nature will die at times. You must know that eternity does not exist in this natural world. The sun is billions of years old, but even that will die someday." After already having her mental state shaken from Yuka, Cirno is faced with two absolute bombshells. 1. She's going to die one day. Even if she's reincarnated before, Shikieki's right. Most things won't last forever, and Cirno's nature will eventually fail. 2. Cirno's fate in the afterlife is uncertain. Now for most characters, Shikigeki tells them that they are on the path to hell, and she also gives advice on how they can adjust course. Cirno is a different case. Shikigeki doesn't know how Cirno's sins will end up, and so she can't tell her how to fix things, only that she has too much power. Cirno doesn't know a path to heaven like everyone else gets to know, because even Shikigeki doesn't know how Cirno could get there. Shikigeki ends up fighting Cirno. This fight is interesting because the player's death dialogue actually ties into the story. If the player loses all of their lives, Shikigeki will say, "It's not unexpected that I win, but that in itself bears no meaning. We will continue until you understand." Shikigeki actually wants Cirno to win. Why? Because then Cirno will comprehend that yes, she's powerful, but she's also powerful to an unnatural degree, which makes her life unstable. Cirno eventually wins, but she doesn't leave happy. Zune's derivative work guidelines prohibit me from posting ending scenes directly, but I'll do my best to describe Cirno's ending. What follows is honestly a very touching scene. Cirno goes to a pond with very little human activity. There's a quiet wind, and flowers tickle the water. Cirno's sitting stoically, just staring at the water. Aya comes and asks Cirno if she's there to bully frogs. Cirno says she's not. When Aya asks again why Cirno came, Cirno says that the place was quiet and far away from many ghosts. Aya questions why Cirno's become so sentimental, especially since she's just a fairy. Cirno angrily tells Aya that she has those same thoughts too, doesn't she? Aya states that she thinks about things like what she had for dinner the night before, and the like. Cirno's perplexed. Cirno's now grappling with the fact that she has a lifespan. In her mind, she probably thinks that everyone with a lifespan is dreading death. When Cirno tells Aya that she's thinking about death, Aya wonders who led Cirno to such morbid thoughts. Related to death, Cirno says that she's at the pond because the lotuses feel otherworldly as they drift along the river amidst all the silence. But Aya says something really nice actually. It's too early for you to be sentimental. After all, the flowers are still blooming on. If you're this sentimental now, it'll be terrible once the petals fall, you know? You'll feel so bad you'll want to hang yourself. And this is what gets Cirno back into her old self. Sure, she's going to die someday, but Gensokyo's nature is very strong. That's not going to happen for a while. She still has a lot of time. And Shikigeki also didn't say she was going to hell, only that she might. Everything she's been doing before wasn't leading her to a super sinful life, so she can just keep doing the things she likes. Cirno says that Ai is right, and gets ready to go freeze frogs, much to Aya's delight. Now, Aya partially gave her advice so she could get more newsworthy actions from Cirno being Cirno. But still, Aya's thought-provoking words really did make Cirno feel better. The narrator concludes the ending with this passage. Along with not knowing how long the flowers will keep blooming, the fairy has no idea how long she'll be in this world. If the flowers want to bloom as much as they like, then it would be best that the fairy enjoys it as much as she feels. We also learn that Cirno still fears what hell would be like, but decides to stop thinking. Cirno rejects thinking about death, and instead decides to live her life. Despite Cirno's simple motivations, she ends up with one of the most complex stories in all of Touhou. From her journeys, she learns that she isn't as indestructible as she thinks she is. She sees people far stronger and scarier than she is, so she knows to not always bite more than she can chew. She almost sulks herself into a depressive life. But Aya saves her. Yes, we're all going to die one day. But you don't always have to think about it, because you know what death takes from us? Life. So before death can take that, we should enjoy life as much as we can.